there, and welcome back to a long overdue episode of Sit and Spin. Me, your host, Joe Royland. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about Record Store Day, Black Friday 2017, and even though by the time this airs, it's going to be Sunday morning, that's been my life lately. I originally wanted to get the show out much earlier, but my experience with Record Store Day, Black Fridays in particular in the past, is that I'm usually so damn busy on that day, I don't even have time to take part in them, much less do a show on them. This year I'd hoped to get one out sooner, but as you can tell probably from the sound of my voice, I've been sick, which has kind of compounded getting it out in a timely manner. But you know what? Even though it's Sunday morning, Record Store Day, even though it's, you know, supposedly a day event, it's really weekend long. And most of, if not all of the releases I'm going to be talking about today, you could probably still go out to your local record store and find them, your local indie record store, and find these if you're so inclined, or some of the other things that came out that day. But we're going to be talking about a few of the things I picked up. And the first one would be Cheap Trick's Christmas Christmas. It's the band's new Christmas album, and this came out on CD and digital download back at the end of October, but this marks the vinyl debut of the record. I've been holding off on hearing it and getting it so I could pick up the vinyl debut. We mentioned in our coverage of the band's most recent album back in episode 153, the episode on Cheap Trick's We're All Alright, that there was a possibility there was going to be another Cheap Trick album by year end, and it would probably be a Christmas album, and so here it is. This is mostly covers of favorite tracks, Christmas tracks by some of the band's artists that they respect, like artists like Slade, The Kinks, Joey Ramone, Harry Nilsson, Chuck Berry, among others. But there are a few new Cheap Trick originals on this record. They're no stranger to doing Christmas songs. They've done some for fan club singles in the past, and they've also had a couple of Christmas tracks on other Christmas compilation albums. But quite psyched to digging into this one. I'm a big fan. A lot of people don't like Christmas music. I like rock and roll Christmas music, and I've got quite a collection, so I'm glad to add this one to mine finally. Next up, one of the other things I was looking forward to picking up is the Sundays, Static and Silence. It's the English band's third and final album. It was originally released back in 1997. This is the first time this record's been available outside of its original UK pressing. It comes on clear vinyl for this release, and the band had taken a 5-year hiatus between this and their previous album, Blind, as lead singer Harriet Wheeler and guitarist David Garvin, who were already a couple, had gotten married and actually had a couple kids, and they took time off to raise a family, and I respect them for that. Having a toddler of my own right now, who's also been taking up quite a bit of my time recently, and it's been one of the contributing factors to me not getting a show out in time. I get it, man. I get wanting to take time off and raise your family. When they came back, some time had gone by, and this record didn't perform quite as well as the first two, and there were other bands who come along and kind of cribbed onto their sound, like the Cranberries, and had success. But even though it didn't do quite as well, it did produce one big hit single in the song Summertime, which is the album's lead-off track. You may remember that one. And this is also the band's second Record Store Day release. Their previous record, Blind, was a Record Store Day release from back in April of this year. This comes on cool brown vinyl, however. And hopefully the band will actually get around to reissuing their first album, Reading, Writing, Arithmetic, on vinyl. Maybe it'll be on blue vinyl or something, or gray, to mimic the album cover here. This is an original copy, which is great. So now my Sundays record collection is complete finally, but I'd still buy a reissue of that album if it came out, just to have it on 180 gram vinyl. But the Sundays, Static and Silence, if you're a fan of them, go out and pick that one up. Now, last but not least, for the EP sections, for what I picked up on Black Friday Record Store Day, the Poncier EP. Now, what this is a 5-track EP of songs crafted by the late Chris Cornell. And it was for the movie Singles. And you remember we talked about some of these songs when we did our coverage of the Singles 25th anniversary reissue on episode 148. These songs had previously only been available on a really super rare promotional only CD, and they'd been out of print until this got reissued, and they showed up as part of the bonus disc that was included on that release. And basically it's called Poncier because these are songs that were for the character played by Matt Damon in the movie. His name was Cliff Poncier. He was the lead singer of the band Citizen Dick. The rest of the members of that band were Jeff Ament, Stone Gossard, and Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, who all had little cameos in the movie, as did Chris Cornell. And basically, it was a prop tape that was in the background of the movie, just using the background after Citizen Dick kind of falling apart and Cliff was doing his solo stuff. And basically, Cornell ran with it and crafted original music for these songs, most of which was actually used in the movie, if not on the actual soundtrack. And songs on this include the song Seasons, which is one of my favorite Chris Cornell solo songs of all, and did appear on the soundtrack proper. There are also early version of the song Spoon Man, which would later show up on Soundgarden's Super Unknown album in 1994. There's also an early version of the song Flutter Girl, which would later turn up on Cornell's debut solo album Euphoria Morning in 2001, I believe it was. And the tracks Nowhere But You and Missing as well to kind of close out this EP. All the artwork for this record was overseen by Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam, and it kind of is done in the style to mimic a cheaply released local indie release. As such, you can see like the silk screening print on it is not quite all the way there in places. There's gaps. And this cover comes in red, which I got. It comes in pink, which I was looking for, but I couldn't find at my local record store. I didn't feel like going around to all of them. Just went to one, being it was Black Friday. And there's also a green cover too. Not only did this get released on vinyl, but there's also a cassette tape version of it too, which also goes through the same painstaking details of looking like an original, cheaply made local cassette release. But really cool to have this on vinyl finally, as we mentioned in our show coverage for singles. We were hoping that maybe that bonus disc, which was originally planned to come out on vinyl, would get reissued on vinyl, possibly for Record Store Day, and this is at least a bit of that, so that's cool. I'll take that over nothing, which is nice, and these were most of the things I was looking for on that anyway. And that's what I got for Record Store Day, Black Friday 2017. There were some other things I considered picking up. There was a Winery Dogs 3-album set, but it was a little pricey. And also Neil Young's Harvest Moon, one of my favorite Neil Young albums of all time, got a reissue. But that was just a Record Store Day first release. That means it's going to be coming out down the road anyway. So even if I missed this early pressing, it'll be out later. And also, I didn't buy too much more because I was saving money for a couple new releases that came out that day too, which we're going to be covering on upcoming shows, hopefully by the end of the year. I don't want to telegraph too much, but I'll give you some hints as to some of the upcoming shows. One of the albums I picked up was the latest release from an artist we've featured on the show before. And there's a record I've been sitting on for about a month or so that I've held off because I knew this other album was coming out. And basically, it's two albums by brothers, competing solo records, by brothers who were in one of the biggest bands of the 90s, if not all time. That's the only clue I'll drop on that one. We're going to be interesting to do a kind of compare and contrast thing for that. One of the other things I picked up was the new 30th anniversary box set release of one of my favorite albums of all time, and there's another one that's come out recently, so you're going to get definitely a show on one of them, if not both of them. Two of my all-time favorite records that were released in 1997. And third show coming up possibly is, not possibly, it's going to come up, but is the new solo album from an artist that was part of our last show. He saw the show and it was kind enough to send me a copy of his new solo album, so we'll be talking about that on an upcoming show. And last but not least, also another record from an artist we featured on the show before, and I've been waiting months for this record to come out. I ordered it as part of the band's Pledge Music campaign, I think way back in spring. And finally, the vinyl version that I ordered got sent to my house last week. It is a double record set. I've only dug into the first album so far, and just based on that, man, this is going to be a contender for my album of the year. I can tell you that much right now. But we'll get to all of those hopefully before the end of the year. Hey, my voice has actually survived through most of this episode without a coughing fit. It's awesome. In my absence, hopefully you've caught some of my appearances on some of my friends and my favorite podcasts. The Dig Me Out podcast, I was a guest on that show where we talked about Silverchair's Freak Show album and whether or not it avoided the sophomore slump. You can check that out on the Dig Me Out podcast site, or I have posted links to it on my page. I was also recently a guest of my friend BJ Cramp's show, the Rock and or Roll podcast, as part of his No Shame November string of episodes where I and a bunch of other friends talked about some of our favorite not so guilty pleasures. I'm also going to be on another upcoming show with BJ where we're going to be counting down our top 10 favorite songs of a particular band. I'm not going to tell you which one it is, but this will be like third or fourth one of these we've done together, and they're always pretty fun, so keep an ear out for that one as well. In the meantime, thanks so much for sticking around and supporting the show and staying with me. Hopefully I won't have to have such a delay in the future, but that's the problem of having a new job where I really love it, but it's very time consuming and takes away from my life, as does the 2-year-old. Who knew toddlers could be so time consuming? I'm sure people much younger than me who have them would tell you that, but much harder when you're twice the age of most people who would have a child at the same age. Anyway, I love the kids, so it's not a hassle, it's a pleasure really, but just keeps me from getting the show out a little early. But thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Sit and Spin. See you then. Meantime, go out to your favorite local indie record store and find some of these record store day releases that are still out there. Talk to you later. And hopefully also, one last thing, hopefully you caught my friend Scott, Righteous Vinyl. He also just did a record store day Black Friday of one of his favorite releases he picked up this week. So check that out too. Talk to you later and see you next time. Take it easy.